In a 10 dream theory. Most of you, I'm sure, have heard this before, probably all of you at this point, but could everything we've seen in these games actually be a dream? I mean, sure, Help Wanted gets kind of meta and in a way puts this theory to bed, but what if all of this are just things that we're seeing in a dream? Like, what if it's not the crying child in his home or in the hospital room waking up every morning? Like, what if it's William Afton dreaming about the insane things he plans on doing, and maybe how well it will work out, or at least how well it would work out for him, because, you know, he's a lunatic. I mean, time works differently in dreams. You can go a whole month of your life and wake up and then realize it's only been 6 hours. And sure, you're able to control your dreams, but that's very difficult to do, because once you realize you're dreaming, for the most part at least, you wake up, or at least that's how it works for me. So what if currently, at least in like a timeline sense, he's only actually considering going on a killing spree, and this is his mind telling him either not to do it or to do it, because again, he's cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. Or there is another theory that we're still dreaming through Crying Child's eyes, or I guess his brain, but now he's just further into the dream trying to justify what he saw so that when he wakes up, hopefully, he isn't terrified. Or maybe he played the games that Scott made in universe and then had nightmares about them. And at 9, the Cult of Afton. A theory I saw from Matt and I'm sure all of you as well. And Help Wanted's Curse of Dreadbarrow DLC. And kind of, I guess, what is the end of the DLC? You're tasked with collecting 4 keys from the corn maze while Grim Foxy chases you around. And if you find all 4, a 5th one will appear. A glitchy one that's kind of brown but also glitching with purple. If you manage to get it, it unlocks a cellar which looks like the barn, except it's not. It just has, it's the prize barn really. But this time, it's all torn up as if it's been decaying for years, and then there's a bunny mask sitting on the table next to an unlit candle, and then probably like a circle of what is either blood or candle wax. I'm gonna go with blood because yeah. Then you put the mask on and your breathing slows down, you relax, and then the DLC, or I guess this minigame, is complete. Then when you head back to the prize counter, the mask is there again and you can put it on if you choose to, but if you do this while holding the glitch trap plushie you get from beating the main game, you start seemingly having a conversation with someone, but you can't really hear the other person, you just hear yourself. Which leads Matt Bat to believe that there is a cult forming around worshipping Afton. And I mean, since Glitch Trap is Afton's preserved code form, I guess, maybe the fact that Vanny is still possessed, seemingly, according to the ruined DLC posters with, you know, her red eyes in the corner, maybe this theory has more merit to it than we originally thought. I mean, if Afton is able to possess both Burntrap and Vanny, assuming Burntrap is still intact, maybe while his sentience with his actual body is his alone, I don't know, maybe this code version is still able to multiply. Or maybe, like, this code isn't actually Afton, but is instead just a virus, and Vanny is actually a robot. Who f***ing knows? In at 8, Psychopath. When it comes to Afton's reasoning for his, hobby, there are plenty of possible reasons, like his kids or his wife or I don't know, literally anything else. But there's also just the classic reason that there is no reason, and that William is just your typical run-of-the-mill sociopath who has no remorse for any of his actions. Now, the vengeful spirit referred to as the one you should not have killed seems to prevent this theory from being true, since if he had no remorse, nobody would really be considered someone he shouldn't have killed. But also, remember that they technically named themselves. Like, William didn't name them because the manifestations in his head are made by the vengeful spirit who wants him to suffer. So William might not have considered them, whoever it be, whether it be Cassidy or Crying Child, not someone that they actually shouldn't have killed, or even or had a hand in killing, okay? It's entirely plausible that William has no regrets for any of his actions, hence why he continued killing after he lost 2 out of his 3 kids to it. I mean, like, he even sent Michael down to see his sister possessing a robot who then also tries to kill him. So yeah, I think it's pretty safe to say that he doesn't care about losing people that he should be loving. He might have even only had kids to actually seem normal. Like those who are considered psychopaths, or more commonly sociopaths, try to fit in with the rest of society. He could have just had kids to accomplish that goal. Plus, I mean, maybe he even killed Charlotte before his kids died. And because, like, we know that he was planning on killing before his kids died, as proven by the fun times. So yeah, there has to be another explanation that isn't his kids. So maybe he's just actually nuts. And at 7, Gregory is 40, or a robot. To be totally honest, the knowledge that this kid Gregory has exceeds even some of my own, okay? This kid is the size of a 4-year-old. He can fit inside Freddy, inside baby strollers, and various other small areas and objects around the Pizzaplex. He's too small to drive one of the go-karts alone, but he knows how to restart generators, operate a trash compactor, and start and drive a car, as well as identify a car battery, connect the jumper cables on that car battery properly, and then use those to fix Freddy's whole recharge every hour issue. He's also the one that comes up with the idea, because Freddy says that it's just not possible. Yeah, I don't even know how to do that properly. Like, how the living hell does this make any form of sense? And how do they try and solve that issue in the true ending, okay? Because Freddy is still going to need to recharge every hour, and they don't have the van this time around. So how do Freddy and Gregory make it to the hill without Freddy needing to recharge? Or like, how do they solve the issue in this scenario, okay? This kid, either way, knows more than I do, but somehow is still the size of a 4-year-old, maybe even younger. Because like, the size of a 4-year-old is actually slightly bigger than what Gregory's size would be based on the opening and Freddy's torso and Freddy's height. A lot of math that we did in our other video, okay? I'll try to remember to link it in one of the corners. It makes no sense, okay? This kid has like a weird superpower that makes this game incredibly confusing and nearly impossible. It only really makes sense if he's a robot that was supposed to mimic a toddler who's been on for decades and learning this whole time. Or he's just secretly 40 somehow. I don't know. Number 6, the one you should not have killed. If Golden Freddy is purely a hallucination, this opens a whole lot of doors, particularly in the identity of the one you should not have killed. You see, the original basis for my point of Crying Child being the one possessing Afton was that Golden Freddy being possessed by Cassidy prevented her from possessing anyone else. However, if Golden Freddy isn't real, then Cassidy can't really be possessing it, and that leaves the door open for Cassidy to possess William. Another issue I'd see would be that Crying Child, if they are to possess someone, it would end up being a relative, considering how he dies in the hospital, and since Crying Child dies in 1983 instead of 1985, he would end up possessing William first, and then Cassidy couldn't. But that's also assuming that Crying Child does possess someone and doesn't just pass into the great beyond once Nightmare gets him or once he survives him. However, Cassidy can be possessing William if, and at 5, Michael is possessed. If Michael was with his brother when he died, or the bite was the moment that triggered the possession due to intense agony despite him dying later, Michael being possessed also explains why he'd be seeing Golden Freddy. Because if the line of "it's me" is in fact Crying Child communicating with his older bro through hallucinations like my original theory stated, then Golden Freddy would just be a representation of the thing that killed Crying Child. Michael would also have been in the hospital when Crying Child died, since, you know, it is his brother after all. And this also helps everyone who was yelling at me in the comments, saying that he would blame his big brother for his death over his father. My original explanation was that he just possessed the closest thing to him, which could have been his father, and then only got vengeful once he saw what his father was doing. But if Golden Freddy is a hallucination, we need an explanation as to why, and Michael being possessed fits the bill. And it's more consistent than him just being tired, stressed, neglected, and all the other stressors that I mentioned in my theory on the subject. Although those are still perfectly valid and are probably not really helping. Michael being possessed by Crying Child and him causing hallucinations also explains the survival logbook. The wrong text and faded text isn't really two spirits having a conversation, but rather the hallucinations that Crying Child is making Mike see. And it also explains that the party we see at the end of FNAF 4 isn't for Crying Child, but rather for Michael. Hence the party was for you line being repeated multiple times, and why Michael had his friends there if the party was for his younger brother. Or the altered text could even be Michael's inner thoughts as he's realizing what has happened. This fixes a whole lot of other issues as well, allowing for William to be possessed by Cassidy, who taunts him in Ultimate Custom Night with the thing that had killed his son. It allows for Michael's hallucinations to be more based on FNAF lore than real world science, which in turn explains the clues that he gets in FNAF 3's minigames, and even explains why he thought punching a phone number onto the wall tiles would actually do something for him, and why it does. And it stops the stupid Golden Freddy was possessed by two souls theory brought on by the logbook, because if Michael was hallucinating, then I would doubt any of that is real, including the blood on the cover and within the book itself, because that was also an issue for me. Why would Fazbear Entertainment be like, here's a book and it's covered in blood? And at 4, FNAF 4 was a game. This would also mean that FNAF 4's main gameplay was actually a game. Now, I know that in Matt Pat's theory he comes to the conclusion that the first 3 or 4 games aren't real. I haven't seen the whole thing as to not shift my judgment or bias my findings. However, I'd argue that the first 3 games would still need to be real, and not just at a random time of day with a notification that ironically interrupts you from being real. No, FNAF 1 through 3 would have to happen for the rest of the series to make sense. The outlier is FNAF 4, whose main gameplay can't really have happened, or at least, if it did, it wasn't what we thought. The FNAF 4 Between Night minigames have to be real, cause like that's the moment that really starts the whole everything getting possessed thing. But one thing that's always bothered me was the nightmare animatronics. If this is supposed to be Crying crying child in a coma having these nightmares, how does Mike know what they look like, since he draws Fredbear's nightmare version in the survival logbook? One way could be that this was just kind of projected into his brain when crying child possessed him, or it could also be that these were simply Michael's nightmares, hence the alarm clock wake up and similar hours that he's had to previous jobs. But another could be that this character simply was one in the games that Scott's in-universe counterpart made, which I feel is the most likely explanation, since it also explains how the character made it into FNAF VR. That also brings up the issue of copyright law in the FNAF universe itself, since Fazbear Entertainment would have had to buy the rights to the nightmare version of the character off of Scott in-game. However, maybe they didn't, since FNAF VR did have a scandal when the first version of the cover art was revealed, since it had used a fan model in the art, thus violating copyright law, which is certainly an odd thing, since, you know, the man created the series, so how did he or anyone on a team accidentally use an asset that they would have had to find and download online? Wouldn't you like have those already, or wouldn't you just get them from Scott? Maybe it was a hint to how some of these characters would be violating in-universe copyright laws as well. We know some of these characters are real, like the original animatronics, but even Springtrap was a real animatronic, since the Fazbear Frights Ruins and Springtrap make a cameo at the end of Sister Location. So, FNAF 3 had to be real, otherwise it would have been Scraptrap showing up instead. Getting close to the end, and at number 3, False Conviction. On this channel's previous full FNAF timeline video, which in my opinion is underrated, Shauna has commented, quote, "Quick little theory. You know how in the first game it says the killer was convicted for the murders of the missing children? If that's the case, I think Henry was falsely convicted. But since they couldn't find the bodies, he got 25 to 30 years and got out of prison when Fazbear Frights opened. It explains to me why he hasn't been involved in the first few games, and I will say I've heard a lot of different information concerning the missing children's incident, so my theory could be wrong, just wanted to put it out there." And then they gave me permission to use this in a video, so yeah. Honestly though, Henry being falsely imprisoned for the missing children's incident does kind of explain a lot, even if he wasn't like actually sent to prison, because again they didn't have any forensic evidence because they couldn't find the bodies. Even him just like being accused would make sense. Yeah, I don't think that he would have been convicted because the case would rely specifically on circumstantial evidence, which is really difficult to do, especially if you're having like an actual proper trial. But when it's the death of multiple kids, they definitely would want to actually explore the avenue, so the case could have been dragged on for a while, until 1993 when the first FNAF game location closed with William inside of it, and then 30 years passed for them to open up Fazbear's Fright, which from what I've seen on the wiki is an amusement park, but I don't know if that's the case. Either way, 30 years is a lot of time for new evidence to come to light, okay? And maybe Henry even got out earlier than that if he actually was sent to prison. But he didn't act until William was free, because again, why would he need to until he was free? Well, the whole he was convicted thing could be explained away by Scott not thinking that there would be another game, let alone 8 others, or 9 I guess at this point. He wanted the story of the killer explained, so it could make sense. But now, this could be a great way to retcon that explains why nothing happened until FNAF 3. So there you go, Scott. You can thank Shauna for that one. Great work. But ultimately, and at number 2, Vengeful Child. Okay, I know it's a controversial idea, but every time I bring this up, someone gets mad at me, so I'm gonna say it again until you all just accept that it's true. Crying Child is the vengeful spirit, okay? I don't know, it makes more sense. Cassidy, other than being Golden Freddy, has literally no lore significance, so if they're not, so yeah, okay? Look, you can't be Golden Freddy and possessing William. You get one thing, okay? You get to possess one thing. That has been the case for everyone except William after, because one of the things that is possessing something else is a code. It's sentient code. Cassidy has no code, okay? They're just a kid. If they possess Golden Freddy, they cannot possess William, okay? So Crying Child's in William because he dies in the hospital, and then Cassidy was in Golden Freddy and was released at the end of FNAF 3. Crying Child wasn't introduced until FNAF 4, okay? There you go. Deal with it. I don't care if you're mad. Deal with it. It's true. Okay? You can yell at me in my DMs after you follow me first, because I need the views. And finally, in at number 1, Remnant Lies. Okay, this is a long video. I know, okay? Just bear with me. Currently, what we know about Remnant and Agony tells us that to destroy it properly, we need to burn it. Hence why there's been so many fires in the series. FNAF 3, FNAF 6, and Security Breach all end with something or someone getting burnt. FNAF 3's fire was all about dealing with Springtrap. FNAF 6 was about putting everyone who knew about the atrocities that occurred at Freddy's to rest. And then in FNAF 9, we burned Trap multiple times to get him to stop possessing Freddy, so he's just even more burned trap, I guess. But this is all because Henry learned that the only way to destroy Remnant was it was fire. That's the only way to put these beings to rest. But is that really how we deal with these animatronics and Remnant infused people? Because while 9 out of 10 doctors recommend Crest Pro Health toothpaste, 3 out of 3 FNAF fires haven't worked, okay? We've been told that fire is the only thing hot enough to burn off the Remnant, but Remnant has also been described as liquid metal. Liquid metal is a hell of a lot hotter than your typical run-of-the-mill gasoline fire, okay? So it doesn't burn away if it can melt. That's not how science works, okay? I have extensive knowledge on fires, okay? Trust me. In essence, every single animatronic that was supposed to be set free by a cleansing fire hasn't. The only time we've seen souls actually be put to rest is in FNAF 3's Happiest Day minigame, which involved no fire and just putting souls to rest because you gave them what they want. Which leads me to believe that we were given false information. Dr. Talbert wouldn't really lie to us, right? I mean, he's researching to see so his little girl can, he can see her again, right? Well, this is where the theory blows your mind, okay? I know it's long-winded, but I don't think Dr. Talbert is a real person. Or rather, I don't think that Dr. Talbert is truly his full name, or I guess his real name. Let's think about it, alright? Who else do we know with an endless flow of Remnant from an undisclosed source and a close personal friend that's working as his opposite? Yeah, that's right, William Afton, who made up the Remnant needs to burn line so that he couldn't be killed when Henry tried. And it's 6 Dave. Back in the glory days, before we knew who William Afton was, we had many names for the one we knew as the purple guy. None of them were canon, but some people believed they were canon, and some still do. And while they were all confirmed as fake once the official name of William Afton was revealed in the Silver Eyes as well as sister location, maybe one or more of them is actually real. I remember people calling Purple Guy Dave before the Silver Eyes came out, at least I think it was before the Silver Eyes came out. But once the Silver Eyes canonized Dave Miller as William's fake name, we've kept our eyes out for anyone using a similar alias. Well, lo and behold, it took a couple years, but in Security Breach you are able to find a duffel bag that contains messages that holds lore and stuff, okay? You find them all over the Pizzaplex. Like one about night terrors after being in the daycare service. But before that one, okay, in the customer service area where you upgrade your complimentary ticket, you can find a bag that says customer complaint, you should fire Dave, he sucks. It's simply called Hi Dave, but also suggests that perhaps maybe William still has an influence over this place, or I guess more so that he may have a couple of people possessed in the company, which explains a lot. Or, you know, there may actually be a cult. You should join mine. Halfway through into number 5, bribery. The fact that William wasn't caught or that everything seems to go perfectly for him has to have an explanation. Okay, there's no way that this guy just got that lucky. No way. Not in FNAF. There has to be a reason behind why the cops didn't check behind the bleeding and horribly smelling animatronics, okay? We know that this is the case because of the newspapers from FNAF 1. They confirmed that the restaurants shut down thanks to animatronics smelling like death and leaking mucus and blood. Here's a quote from one of those clippings. Police were contacted when parents reportedly noticed what appeared to be blood and mucus around the eyes and mouths of the mascots. One parent likened them to reanimated carcasses. How were the bodies not found then? Okay, they could literally just have tested the blood, found that it was similar to the parents of the kids that went missing if they didn't have the kids' DNA on file, which would be understandable, and then easily have gotten a warrant to take the animatronics. But they didn't, and the bodies were never found, and Afton got released. How the living hell is that possible? The only way that I can see it being possible is bribery. William had to be bribing these people. It's impossible otherwise, okay? Unless they're just stupid, which is plausible, but like, that's like police fundamentals, okay? If there is what appears to be blood at somewhere that is a crime scene or a suspected crime scene, you test it. Come on. At least if it's fake, you'll know. And at 4, limb transplant. William Afton is a tricky fiend. He somehow, no matter what, always seems to get his way with whatever scheme he's cracked up just because he's that lucky. Or just that kind of person. I don't know, maybe he has an infinity gauntlet or something. I don't f***ing know. But if he does, it would explain a lot, since in every game after the introduction of Springtrap where we see William Afton, he has a new design. And it's not a design that could easily be explained by just like the suit decaying or being torn. No, Springtrap to Scraptrap, like what? His head seemingly doubles in size. And then Scraptrap to Burntrap, it went back to normal, okay? Like what? The whole time, however, it also remained to be William Afton as proven in Ultimate Custom Night. So like, what's the deal here, Scott? How did this happen? the best explanation that we have currently is artistic license. Like, Scott just ran with the idea that he thought he was gonna make Springtrap scarier, since a load of people were upset originally when Springtrap came out and he didn't want that repeating itself, but then in the process he also confused the hell out of us, so then maybe in Security Breach he went back to something closer to the original design and then just like swapped missing limbs out for Glamrock animatronic parts because, you know, continuity or something, although FNAF doesn't really care about continuity. But again, the whole artistic license thing also explains the other design discrepancies, specifically Scrap Trap, because that's just that is shameful. And at 3, FNAF 3 ending explained. All of this also explains the FNAF 3 endings and why Golden Freddy's head isn't present in the good one. Yes, no lights being on would make the head in the back harder to see, but that symbolism of being behind them, watching them from the shadows, isn't lost on me, and is explained as Crying Child watching these souls while possessing Michael. And when these souls are free, in that ending, we actually see the heads of the actual animatronics, like the physical heads. And since Golden Freddy was never real, there need not be a head for the character. Plus, Cassidy would still be possessing William at this point and thus not set free. Clearly, since, you know, the man survives the fire of that game. So the Golden Freddy in the Happiest Day minigame could very well just be Crying Child finally conquering his fear of Fredbear. Hence why Golden Freddy doesn't make an appearance in future games. Sister Location doesn't have one, or any hallucinations for that matter. Pizzeria Simulator is the same way, except I personally think that FNAF 6 is also a game. FNAF VR only had Easter eggs of the It's Me line, which has been found by few, and Easter eggs are a really gray area for this, especially when it's an Easter egg in a DLC. But even still, the character themselves doesn't show up. After FNAF 3, it seems like Crying Child has let go of his anger towards his brother and the fear of the animatronic, which is why he is no longer hiding in the shadows and no longer taunting Michael with visions. But ultimately, in at number 2, FNAF 6 is a game. If this Golden Freddy hallucination idea is true, and everything else that I've suggested is as well, since it would only make sense for all that to actually happen, that would mean that FNAF 6 is also one of the games. Not only is it another outlier like FNAF 4, but it's the only game to feature Scrap Trap and Scrap Baby. Now keep this in mind, because like Mickey Mouse Clubhouse, that is a special tool that we'll use for later. Because the whole point of FNAF 6 is tying up loose ends. It's ending the story. It's letting the remaining secrets of Fazbear Entertainment die off. Now, Henry aims to achieve this using a random person, seemingly, since he clearly states the job listing wasn't intended for Michael at the end of the game. And no matter how counterintuitive that may be, everything important here is kept a secret. Or well, I get like the animatronics found in the back alley are. Scrap Trap, Scrap Baby, Lefty, Molten Freddy, they're all very hush-hush. They're left out back at the end of your shift, in the dark, they're kept away from any of the patrons, and anyone who knew about them is supposed to die at the end of the game, along with the location being buried as we see in Security Breach. And while the location and its fire may have been true, notice that Burn Trap is more like Spring Trap than Scrap Trap, despite Scrap Trap supposedly being the literal basis for Burn Trap. Like it would have to go directly from Scrap Trap to Burn Trap. Oh, and remember that surprise tool? The whole this is the only game to feature these? Combining that with anyone who knew about these being dead, how did these characters show up later? How did Scrap Baby make it into FNAF VR as a plush baby skin? And how are they both in Ultimate Custom Night? Nobody should have known enough to put her in FNAF VR, and then Ultimate Custom Night? Well, that also has the Nightmare animatronics, who we've established as having to be game characters. Therefore, FNAF 4 being a game and the origin of the Nightmares makes any game featuring those in universe games as well. Ultimate Custom Night and VR also make mention of scrap characters, who then also have to be game characters, meaning that FNAFs 4, 6, and 7 are all video games made by Scott in universe. But most importantly, we can stop worrying about the Spring Trap to Scrap Trap to Burn Trap design changes, because in reality it went from Spring Trap to Burn Trap, and Scrap Trap was there to avoid copyright issues with Fazbear Entertainment. And finally, in at number 1, Michael isn't Glamrock Freddy. I'm sorry to break it to you guys, but this would also mean that Michael is not possessing Glamrock Freddy, and it could be for multiple reasons. One, it could be that Crying Child is still possessing him at the time of FNAF 6's fire, which would keep him alive, much like William in Burn Trap's suit. We know that Crying Child keeps possessing Michael after FNAF 3, given that he survives Ennard and then Ennard's departure, which it could only be done if he was possessed and being kept alive like William, unless Mike is a robot. 2, since FNAF 6 is a game, Mike may not really have been at the location when it burnt down. Henry may have done it all himself, or maybe actually he let Mike leave leave instead of, not giving him the choice like we see in the actual game, which basically resulted in Henry murdering Michael. Or the third scenario, which I personally prefer, that Scott's in-universe counterpart, the indie game dev who made FNAF 4, 6, and 7, is Michael, and that he used these games to tell a version of the story where he dies so that he can either live a more normal life or prevent suspicion from Fazbear Entertainment if they looked into his past a little too closely. And if I'm throwing another wild theory out there, what if the FNAF movie, the one using the Mike screenplay, will feature Scott Cawthon at his desk working on a game as an older version of Michael? There is a reason that he used himself for that photo and made sure we knew it wasn't Scott himself, because he knew that whenever he wanted to reveal the game dev's identity, he would be available. And if he used someone else, they may have not been able to make it to set for the final shot of the movie. Firstly, we have to establish whether this would be something new or if it would have been this way since the start. And there are a few indicators that might surprise you. In my latest playthrough, the security breach but it's ruined by mods video that released on Saturday, April 2nd on this channel, I made a note to point out that Freddy doesn't really seem to care when you get locked inside the Pizzaplex. He also seemed to care more about the fact that you got a crappy Mr. Hippo magnet as your free gift, and sounds more disappointed about that than the whole locked in and might get killed by a serial killer thing. Which begs the question, is he really all that disappointed? Obviously, if he was blatantly evil, he would have just turned us over to Vanessa, but if he was really crafty, he would gain our trust first. After all, he should have Glitchtrap's code inside him, right? Well, let's look at what he does before the doors close. He sends us to get a pass in order to free him from his green room, and then everything seems to go well. But then, for some random reason, without ever mentioning this before, he tells us that he senses we are broken and that he needs to bring us to medical so that we can get fixed up or something like that. Whether this was meant to be a nod to Crying Child or not doesn't matter in this case, okay? The point here is that it doesn't actually do anything. We get our run-in with Vanessa, that later gets turned into a TikTok meme, but other than that, we stay the same. We don't get healed, we don't get a band-aid, because we could have had it from the start. We get in that booth, instantly turn around, and move the curtain to peep outside and watch that scene. After that, Freddy doesn't mention how we're still broken, and I don't know about you, but me standing in a booth isn't really gonna heal me, okay? It seems odd if you ask me, especially since now with that little pit stop, even if you go full steam ahead making no stops, sprinting the whole time, you can't make it out of the doors. That one little interaction is the 30 seconds that we needed in order to escape out the front doors, but thanks to Freddy, now we don't make it. And you can't use his programming as an excuse for this either, because if we want to use programming as evidence, this man was supposed to be controlled by Afton's virus, and the glitching out should have messed him up. Plus, his coding isn't designed to scan children that are literally inside his body. If he picked up on the injury when Gregory was outside of his stomach for the first time and he was scanning us, why not take him to medical instantly, or as soon as you got out of the green room? And again, why make it seem like your coding is letting you scan a kid that's inside you, when nobody should be in there? And seemingly, Aunt Jen didn't really have any children of her own, so unless there's some random extra brother or sister out there that we haven't heard about, Henry has no living relative. So what happens after that? Like, if there's no actual family? Well, in the event that the court cannot determine who your next of kin is, guess what? Oh yeah, everything you've worked your whole life for becomes property of the state. Yeah. And with Utah typically being a red state, you best believe they'll be selling that IP to whoever wants to pay enough to actually reopen Fazbear Entertainment. This also would explain why William keeps getting away with everything, because I'm guessing, especially in this exaggerated form of story, the police must have been pretty easy to bribe. So yes, after William is declared dead, the company would have gone to Henry, but since Henry has no relatives remaining, at the end of FNAF 6 at least, the IP of Freddy Fazbear and his friends would have gone to the state of Utah, which would have been sold or licensed to whoever bought it, because, you know, they wanted to open the Mega Pizzaplex, which is a whole other question in and of itself, because like they ended up building it right where Afton needed it to be, so who really bought it? That's a question for another day. And unless Michael somehow had a kid of his own and then the state decided to give it to them, both of which are unlikely since it would have been Henry's company after that, or even if it didn't go to Henry 100%, Michael still didn't have any kids, the state would definitely be the ones who would own the franchise and would sell it to the highest bidder without a second thought, because let's be honest, literally any state would do that despite the amount of kids who have died in these restaurants. Also, fun fact, at the time he dies, Michael Afton is like 50 years old. Because assuming Michael is a teenager, or at least closer to it, in FNAF 4, that takes place in 1983, then FNAF 1 takes place in 1993, so at this point he would be at least 20, considering everything else. Then the place closes down and doesn't reopen for another 30 years until FNAF 3. So by FNAF 3, he is already 50. Michael is already 50 years old in FNAF 3, and then however long it takes for them to get to FNAF 6 after that. So Michael Afton is at least 50 years old, which is actually insane. So who knows how old William is? I don't want to know. But there you have it. Okay, that's how Freddy Fazbear's reopened so much, and that's how it's still around even after everyone associated with the company has died. Not everyone who remembers Henry should have really thought that one through, but what a wonderful world we live in, huh? If only Henry had named someone that he trusted as the CEO so that none of this could actually reopen or continue. Oh wait, that's right. You burned the one person who also wanted all of this to end and never happen again. All because you assumed that he wanted to die so that nobody would remember. Hey bozo! The parents of the victims remember, and a load of other people do too. It was kind of a big issue in your universe. So, Henry will forever and always be the dumbest character in FNAF history, and you can't change my mind on that, okay? Because no matter what stupid things William has done, at the very least he got away with it. He got the outcome he wanted. Henry's just dumb. FNAF 6 was supposed to be the end of the Afton story, okay? That's what Henry sets out to do in this game. That's the whole point of the game. Make sure that nobody remembered what happened there, despite the parents of the victims definitely remembering. However, this dumb figured that the first fire didn't work, so you know what, let's try it again. And in fact, he was so confident in this plan for whatever goddamn reason that he actually lets himself die in this process to leave nobody remembering what happened. But like I said, dude, even if Henry and William are dead and their kids, okay, the parents of the victims still remember what happened. And as we learn in Security Breach, there are other parents who remember it too. Because there's duffel bags citing the 9 missing children from the Pizzaplex as happening, quote, again. If Henry had stuck around to see if the job was really done, like around a maybe like Hearthstone or I don't know, literally anything else, maybe William wouldn't have been able to possess Vanny and then come back yet again to wreak havoc. The Pizzaplex missing children are a direct result of Henry just being a moron, and you can't tell me any different, okay? He should have lit the place up, smashed everything that survived, and then maybe he could have offed himself, but make sure the job's done first. God damn it, dude. Like, maybe even wait a few years to make sure that it's done, especially when this hasn't worked multiple times before. But you know what? Therein lies the question. Most of Henry's issues come from him opening the restaurants again and again. He even licenses the rights to people who make the FNAF 3 location possible, but after FNAF 6, how could Fazbear's reopen as the Pizzaplex, especially after both Henry and William are considered dead? Well, typically the next of kin would be considered the children or spouse of the deceased, but we know that both Henry and William have no kids, well, that survived, and at the very least that William has no wife. So assuming Henry's wife isn't in the picture as well, what could have happened to the Fazbear rights and intellectual property? Well, as I said in a reply to Aurelia's comment, if the deceased person has no children, the next of kin will move to the parents. After this point, the next of kin includes collateral heirs, or siblings of the deceased. Collateral heirs can also refer to nieces and nephews. So in essence, what that would entail would be giving the IP to the parents of William and or Henry, most likely Henry because William would have probably been declared dead before this after being missing for 30 years come FNAF 3, but if their parents also weren't in the picture, which would be understandable since like in FNAF 6 Henry would be like 60 at like the youngest, so his parents are most likely dead at that point, let's be real. So then we'd have to think about any siblings Henry may have, and it is certainly possible in the game story since thanks to the Silver Eyes we actually got confirmation that Henry Henry has a sister named Jenny. Jenny Emily, otherwise known as Aunt Jen, is a character in the novel The Silver Eyes, The Twisted Ones, and The Fourth Closet. Being the sister of Henry Emily, Charlotte is her niece. After the passing of Charlie's father, Charlie was actually taken and cared for by Aunt Jen. However, you may think that this is all solved. It's not, because there's one caveat. Aunt Jen was killed by Circus Baby as she was impersonating Charlie in The Fourth Closet. Spoiler alert, but I mean, even I haven't read the books, so I don't think you'll care at this point. Everyone who's going to read the books has read them, so. Given that the other two humans on this screen, Vanny and Gregory, are also connected to the Aftons, we can guess that this is the case with the blonde girl as well. However, I don't think that the girl herself is Elizabeth. Here's the wow moment, alright? I think that this girl is possessed by Elizabeth. Yeah, I know, right? Hear me out. I know I said that that's not possible with Susie, but that's because we freed her, alright? There are 7 faces on the Blob, the secret antagonist of Security Breach. 4 of them have lit red eyes and 2 of them don't. The 4 that do are Naked Endo, FNAF 1 Bonnie, FNAF 1 Chica, and Mangle, all of which are somehow present in some form or another in the Pizzaplex. Mangle is Roxy, Bonnie was Bonnie, Chica was Chica, and we fight multiple Endos on multiple occasions. The 2 that aren't present, however, don't have their eyes lit up, Baby and the Puppet. But we know that fire doesn't do anything to Remnant, clearly. I mean, Afton has burned, what, 3 times now, and none have stuck? And in another video, we determined that the spirits can only be freed when they get their unfinished business resolved, like the missing children in Happiest Day. Baby also doesn't seem too happy about burning in FNAF 6. She in fact says that she wants to make her daddy proud, and dying to fire would really do the opposite considering how many he's survived. So, much like we suspect Michael could have, Elizabeth could have swapped bodies as well, into one of the missing children that Vanny took. Hell, that could have been why Vanny took them in the first place. Afton wanted his daughter to have a vessel, hence why this one looks so much like Elizabeth's original body. This also explains why there is red on her shoes, because it's meant to represent the glowing red eyes that would be in the animatronic head. Remember, it's damn hard to kill an Afton for good, and in the books, Baby is really the one orchestrating everything, at least when it comes to the Afton amalgamation. Especially since this girl is facing away, her eyes could also be green. And I have a feeling that throughout the game we will see her eyes either flip-flop or start off blue and become green or something like that. Or, what I think would be the coolest way to do this would be having her eyes green normally, like if we see it in like a camera or something, but be blue in a mirror. So, here's how I think the story went. After the FNAF 6 fire, William gets a hold of Vanny in order to get his body back. He creates, through the company, a new location on top of the old one to hide his deeds, and then he sets himself free. In the process, though, he notices that his daughter's spirit is also stuck. Since this is the first time they've been together since he put her in the basement of sister location, he decides to help her out, and causes Vanny to start abducting kids who look like his in an effort to rebuild his former family. Given that his youngest son is either still possessing him or now loose to the elements as well, the blonde girl is then kidnapped and Elizabeth finds her suitable host, so she's possessed. And now she follows Vanessa around in an effort to keep an eye on her and remind her that Afton is always watching. She starts manipulating her through encoded chats and messages, and hacks the FNAF AR animatronics to cause them to malfunction, and gets Vanessa promoted to security guard to keep an even closer eye on her. As a part of her observations, she starts therapy just like Vanessa does, and despite her telling the truth about her family history, it doesn't line up with the girl that she's possessed. Hence the one therapist calling out Client 46 for it, and her explanation about what happened to her family seeming to lack emotion, since after all she watched it happen as Baby instead of experiencing it as an actual child. After the collapse, she is either brought back by Afton requesting help with himself, or possibly also to help secure the vessel for Crying Child, who escaped along with a Michael-possessed Glamrock Freddy. To me, this seems like a game about reuniting. Reuniting with lost brothers, lost hope, but most of all, reuniting a family. The Afton family. After all, we have all the characters now. The misguided father whose misdeeds cost him everything, his loyal daughter who wants to see her family back, the mother who now agrees and is a part of the father's plan, even if unwillingly so, and the sons, one too scared to do anything, and the older brother who helps him beat the circle that their father created, who rights their wrongs and makes up for their family's sins. What do you think? I feel like I'm pretty spot on with this one, and that this could be a great launching point for the next part of the series. series, but let me know what you think down below. Firstly, let's go over a theory that I've been seeing that I wanted to stop in its tracks. I mean, it's probably not gonna happen, because this video is probably gonna get like 6,000 views max, but either way, the identity of this little girl is 100% not Susie, the girl who goes on to possess Chica. Susie has been dead for a long time once the game takes place, being dead for over 50 years or so. So there is literally no possible way that this girl could be Susie. You may be thinking that she could be possessed by Susie, but we released her spirit in the Happiest Day minigame, and she has only possessed Chica as far as we've known. Some assume that the Happiest Day minigame takes place at the end of the timeline, however I don't think that's true. Considering how FNAF 3 was supposed to be the end, and that when FNAF 3 is over we get the good ending, to me that indicates that the Happiest Day minigame takes place in FNAF 3, especially considering how the simulated pizzeria FNAF 6 does not have to lure the original animatronics back to the pizzeria, meaning that they did not need to be released because, well, they had already been dealt with. So about this girl, let's go over some evidence about what we see on the poster. Firstly, there is her blonde hair. We know that it's blonde thanks to the rim lighting on the character being blonde at her hair, and while yes it may seem stupid, I think that the general consensus is that this girl is blonde. While rim lighting is the color of the light that it is instead of the color of the person, it also isn't going to be yellow on a darker surface, so this means that her hair is not black, eliminating Cassidy from the race. So this is not the spirit that was possessing Golden Freddy, or who a good amount of people consider the one you should not have killed, aka the vengeful spirit from Ultimate Custom Night. The girl in the middle is also wearing a jacket and what appears to be a denim skirt, fingerless gloves, white socks, and sneakers that light up Skechers style. Hashtag not sponsored, but like Skechers, hit me up, we can probably work something out. Now this may not be out of the ordinary to any of you, but this instantly reminded me of someone from a previous game. As I did mention this in another video, Elizabeth Afton. Okay, I get that she's been dead for longer than Susie, but just hear me out, okay? See, when we were playing Sister Location, we ended up getting the cutscene where Elizabeth is grabbed and killed by Baby, turning Baby's eye color from blue to green. This outfit that this mysterious girl is wearing is nearly identical to the one that Elizabeth was wearing in that minigame, aside from the light up shoes that wouldn't be available for another decade by real world standards. However, in FNAF in 1983, they also had discs that emitted sounds that altered the appearance of things in your brain. So a couple of light up shoes 10 years early doesn't really seem like that much of a stretch. The skirt is also identical to the skirt that Elizabeth wears in that cutscene, and the jacket could easily be covering up a similar styled shirt, which could be pushing the idea that Gregory having two stripes on his shirt is definitely important. But I want to talk about the color. You see, there is no real color on this girl. Bumping up the saturation, brightness, or vibrance actually shows that this girl is drawn in black and white. Have you ever heard of the saying, lack of evidence is sometimes itself evidence? Like maybe you're dealing with a professional killer, or that these thieves are overly cautious. Well, I think that this is a similar situation. Think about it. Why would they draw this girl in black and white? I mean, yeah, sure, she's backlit, but being backlit doesn't make you grayscale. This is an indication that the color of this girl's clothing can possibly mean something. Maybe Scott thought that he was too subtle with Gregory, only putting two stripes on his shirt, so this time he went for the full outfit including color. Speaking of color, there's also the matter of her shoes, the only part of her that isn't rimlit that has color. The color of her lights being purple and red. Purple obviously being a nod to William Afton, aka the purple guy, a character so synonymous with purple that I can't wear my favorite shirt on this channel now without being called a serial killer. And red, while misleading, actually does tie back to Elizabeth Afton in the form of Baby. Her entire outfit was red, including her bright red hair, and I mean, like, it seems fairly reasonable to assume that this girl has at least a connection to the Afton family, although there is another explanation for the red on her shoes. Give me a minute. Unless that's the point. What if Afton's virus did grab a hold of Freddy and just made everything seem like it was fine? Having an animatronic protect you and gaining the kid's trust is a lot better than just nabbing him out of nowhere. Plus, I mean, there would have been plenty of times this kid could have been gotten, particularly when Freddy gets grabbed by the Moondrop animatronic right outside of Parts and Service. You're telling me that Moondrop, the daycare attendant, told Vanessa that Freddy was in the Parts and Service room, but didn't mention that we were in the recharge station right next to Parts and Service? I mean, he knew, like he waved at us while taking Freddy away. But Vanessa knows that just grabbing Gregory won't accomplish Afton's true goal. So instead, what do? They stage a fake interrogation where Freddy once again looks like the good guy, and then she leaves through the most inconvenient way for her possible. Why would she leave to Rockstar Row when she could easily come our way and then head to the main atrium? That's where Gregory was. That's where all the animatronics have been spotting him. And then, after Vanessa leaves Freddy in parts and service so that his casing can be put on a new endo after corporate gives the go-ahead, she doesn't seem to be suspicious that he's walking around Rockstar Row. Like, who would have repaired him if not Gregory? There is literally no other living human in the Pizzaplex at this point, and the whole containment cylinder thing is so that it protects humans on the outside. Why is Vanessa so nonchalant about Freddy walking around? It was something that confused me in my first playthrough. I figured that Vanessa would just pull us out of Freddy if we got too close, but no. And a reasonable explanation to that is that she isn't sus because she knows the plan. And also, it's worth noting that Afton has spent all this time in a burnt down Pizzaplex that also contained his daughter, who has pulled this exact same scheme on us prior to this game, okay? So he could have picked up on it from her, either while they were burning, while she was trying to impress him, or maybe if she is controlling the blob and it's not actually Funtime Freddy. Just saying. And maybe I'm wrong about that, okay? It's entirely possible. I mean, after all of this, it is a FNAF game, right? Where not everything makes sense for the sake of the story that Scott wants to tell. But what about the post-game? What about after we supposedly end Afton? What then? Is Freddy on the up and up? Or is there enough of Afton in there for us to be in danger? Well, it's actually a pretty interesting idea, since there is the distinct possibility that Afton is now controlling Freddy. Sure, when we haven't defeated Afton's body and he ends up possessing Freddy, we get killed instantly and Freddy gets purple eyes. However, in the actual ending to this boss fight, we supposedly stop Burn Trap. But then, the area around us starts collapsing. What if Afton was using Freddy as a means of escape when he knew that his situation was dire? I mean, honestly, if we think about this, Afton was downloading his consciousness wirelessly into Glamrock Freddy while we were fighting him. That was the whole point of the fight. But would it really reset to 0 once he stops and tries again? Or would it just be like pausing a download? Honestly, with the kind of buffoonery in this series, I don't think we can discount the possibility that Afton was simply just putting a pause on the download in an effort to eventually still take over Freddy and potentially spend time with his robot son. Or maybe just escape into the world once more. But like, seriously, he was transferring his consciousness into Glamrock Freddy by putting his hand on a monitor. And not even a monitor, like a dinosaur monitor at that. I don't think that we can like just go like, oh no, he's not in Freddy, he's dead, he's gone forever. That's, no. If he can transfer his brain from an animatronic into another animatronic through touching a computer screen where he can see the guy, that's... No. If you think that Afton's done, you have not been paying attention to this series at all. And if you think that Glamrock Freddy is safe, again, you don't know the series in the slightest. I hate that I was right about Freddy, because eventually it's gonna be revealed that he's evil. I know it. There we have it, friends. Is Glamrock Freddy secretly evil? Possibly, but it all depends on whoever takes over next. I don't know which way they'll go, but like at least now there's yet another avenue for them to explore if they so choose. Was that like 25 now? What do you think? Who am I kidding? I'm sure you all hate this idea, but nevertheless, it was fun to think about.